Danielle, my friend, a lot to get to. Let's start with Trump's and J.D. Vance. I'm getting a little bit tired that they're not including J.D. Vance in this because it includes him. Trump and J.D. Vance's baseless claims about Haitian migrants eating pets in Springfield, Ohio. This rhetoric has led to bomb threats, forced evacuations, and closures of public schools and municipal buildings for 2 straight days. And on Friday, Trump vowed to start his mass deportation plan with the Haitian immigrants in Ohio, despite the fact that they are here in the United States legally. How dangerous is this rhetoric, Danielle?
I mean, it's incredibly dangerous, Katie. And look, this is not the first time that we've seen this, right? We've seen Donald Trump telling people on January 6th that things were going to be wild, go and take your country back. And we saw how that turned out. And I wish that, you know, the people of Springfield, Ohio, the city of Springfield, Ohio, would think about potentially suing Donald Trump because it is actually causing harm. This is not just regular, political rhetoric. It's stochastic terrorism. And we need to actually call it what it is. Donald Trump on Tuesday says these lies to 60 million people that tuned in for the debate. And then 2 days later, there are bomb threats. Like, we have to be able to connect the dots here that Donald Trump and J.D. Vance and the Republican Party as a whole are dangerous.
Danielle, we've also seen Trump now publicly spending even more time with conspiracy theorist Laura Loomer. As I mentioned, she's a September 11th denier, and he actually brought her in New York with him to a September 11th memorial ceremony. I mean, I can't imagine anything more offensive to those that lost and suffered in any way as a result of 9/11. Take a quick listen to what Donald Trump said when asked about Laura Loomer.
Laura is a supporter. I don't control Laura. Laura has to say what she wants. She's a free spirit. Well, I don't know. I mean, look, I can't tell Laura what to do. Laura's a supporter. She is a strong person. She's got strong opinions, and I don't know what she said, but that's not up to me. She's a supporter.
Danielle, you're judged by the company you keep. What does it say that Trump surrounds himself with these kinds of sycophants and supporters like Laura Loomer?
I mean, how many white supremacists does Donald Trump need to pal around with? How many times does he need to have dinner with them? So whether it's having dinner with Nick Fuentes, right, which is a known white supremacist, whether it is hanging out with Laura Loomer, who has said some of the most offensive and vile things on social media, right? And so birds of a feather flock together. You can't tell me that all of your friends happen to be known anti-Semites and white supremacists, but somehow you are not. Right. So we know why Laura Loomer is hanging around with Donald Trump, because she wants the fame. She wants, the power that comes with being associated with those circles. But we should also be able to pin the things that Laura Loomer says and has said, most recently, really derogatory things about the vice president of the United States and what the White House would, quote unquote, smell like if she were to become the president of the United States. It's obscene. And these things need to be called out.
Well, Danielle, who we haven't heard from? We haven't heard from J.D. Vance. J.D. Vance's wife, Usha Vance, is Indian. Like, why is it that we haven't heard anything coming from J.D. Vance? Not a single peep from him about the type of insanity that's coming from Laura Loomer.
I mean, Katie, but when we did hear from J.D. Vance, he was almost apologetic that his wife was not white, right? Like, there are very weird things coming out of this campaign. But what we know is that they do not have a path for America. As Donald Trump said on stage, he has concepts of a plan. Donald Trump has been in the political sphere for how long now? Going on close to a decade. And we're still waiting on his health care plan. We're still waiting on his infrastructure bill, right? These people don't have plans. But, it makes me sad to think that J.D. Vance has biracial children, and you're hearing the things that these people in your party are saying, and you don't stand up for your own family. So if a man can't stand up for his own family, we think that he's going to stand up for the rest of us? I don't think so.
He's taking notes from Ted Cruz. Danielle, before I have to let you go, let's talk about the prospect of actually another debate happening. Donald Trump is debating his own self. Not going to do it. I'm going to do it. I mean, it was pretty pathetic that he went to the spin room after the debate on Tuesday looking for some love. Do you think that Donald Trump actually wants another beatdown by Vice President Kamala Harris and will actually subject himself to a third presidential debate?
No, I do not think that Donald Trump will subject himself to another third debate. I mean, look, when I saw a split screen between 2016 Donald Trump in a debate and 2024 Donald Trump, and there is clear deterioration that has happened. And I wish that, the mainstream media would ask questions about his mental acuity in the same ways that they did President Joe Biden, because this is not the same man that we have seen that came down the escalator in 2016. So, no, I think it was very clear that when he's asked direct questions and given the opportunity to answer them, Donald Trump wants to focus on crowd size or Hannibal Lecter. He doesn't know where he is. Right? He was in Arizona the other day and saying to people in Pennsylvania, go ahead and vote. So, no, I don't think that he wants to subject himself to another 90 minutes with somebody who is on top of their game.
Danielle Moody, always good to see you. Thanks for being here and always bringing the truth. I appreciate you.